Agni parthene despina achrante Theotoke Nymphiani frefel parthene migdinalasa alendros
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Orthodox Logos. My name is Ian Silver and I'm here with my co-host Nathaniel Harmon.
Greetings.
And today we are going to be diving into both the Arthurian legend of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and also the abomination that is the Hollywood work of art, also titled The Green Knight.
It's almost like Tarantino tried to do it, except the guy that directed it was worse. Because I think a Tarantino adaptation of this would actually be interesting. It would still probably be very bad, but it would be interesting.
Or
this one wasn't.
Or a Guy Ritchie. Because
What's Guy Ritchie done?
Snatch,
Oh,
Lock,
really? That was
Stock,
Guy
and
Ritchie?
but he also did that one recently. I think it was about King Arthur or his men. I can't remember the name of it. I'll remember it at some point. But the cinematics were better. In my honest opinion, this movie cinematically, as an artist, I loved it. But as far as the story goes, if you are at all familiar with any Arthurian legends or anything that has to do with Sir Gawain, the Green Knight,
Or Christianity?
yeah, pretty much. So yeah, we see that. I guess we can dive right into it as far as the differences.
Well, first off, you called to my attention, because I guess Ian's seen this movie a couple of times, and last night he convinced me to watch it, and it was one of the more unpleasant experiences of my life. But Ian pointed out to me that the portrayal of the Green Knight in the contemporary film is actually very close to the portrayals of the Green Man, or the spirit of the Green Man, and I don't know anything about that, which may come as a surprise to Ian, so he's going to have to play the role of the scholar for a moment, even though I'm not actually a scholar. I am just lazy and I like to read.
Yeah, so I'm not, super versed in this topic exactly, but I do understand who the Green Man is, and going back to my so-called pagan days, I've done drawings of it. I've, not worshipped the Green Man at all in any way. I was going to say I did just to start the show off with a did you know? No, but so the Green Man is commonly found in many forms throughout history, mostly pagan. And, the common feature of his face is that he's covered by foliage, leaves, often sprouting from their mouths, depending on, the depiction of them. Also found carved in wood, which is kind of ironic because I did a wood burning of the Green Man, which I showed Nathan. I will not show you guys, and I should probably throw it away. Or also stone, and in medieval churches and cathedrals. Why they were there included the construction of these buildings by masons and perhaps have been lost in the midst of time. Some people suspect that he was a bridge between the new beliefs of Christianity and the pagan beliefs it replaced. Evidence for this crossover of religions could be assumed from the sighting of Christian churches at the site of pagan sacred places. And what we see in this movie and in symbolism in general is there's like a lot of crossovers or symbols that were once pagan that have been, turned Christian.
Repurposed, or
exactly.
shall we say resacralized.
Or also we see a lot of Christian symbols that have been, turned to be inverted or blasphemed into pagan satanic symbols. And we'll talk about that later when
Ian is very excited to talk about that. He texted me last night and was like, "Hey, did you know?" I said, "Yes, Ian, I did know." But it's a fun story. We'll talk about it shortly.
Yeah. So the term Green Man is modern in nature, dating back to 1939 or so, when Lady Raglan published an article in the Folklore Journal. He has also appeared as Jack in the Green, and there's been a massive revival of these appearances around the date of Beltane or May Day. Every spring, you'll see pagan festivals. If you go on YouTube, you can look up Jack in the Green. There's a lot of people dressing up as him, marking a rebirth and the start of the cycle of growth. So with the Green Man, what we see is it's a way to portray life, death, and rebirth, which, generally speaking, aren't bad things if you look at it in a Christian manner. But when you're looking at life, death, and rebirth in a pagan or magical sense, it's a complete inversion of the Christian. For us, there's life, and you can't talk about life without death, and vice versa. And for rebirth, our rebirth would be,
baptism.
Yeah, baptism, or even on the day of not the day of judgment, but when Christ returns and we are restored fully in our bodies in heaven.
Right.
So, and then this article says, I'm sure that the Green Man means different things to different people in this day and age. To many, he represents a figure who is an environmental guardian, the keeper of the forests and woods. And here we see, the green people, the climate change freaks probably love the Green Man. So it's a pagan deity, a forest deity, a vegetation deity, if you will. And in the adaptation of The Green Knight, if you've seen it, you will notice that when the Green Knight enters, he is nothing like the Arthurian legends. He is more pagan in the way he appears, and he looks identical in a lot of cases to the Green Man, with trees growing out of him and foliage. So yeah, I thought that was kind of interesting, and I didn't realize it today. I was like, I see what they're trying to do. I've seen this before, and it's just another inversion in the film that takes away from, the original poem.
Right. Thank you for that, Ian. Like I said a minute ago, I did not know anything about the Green Man. I've seen the face before. I've seen the carvings. It's notable for an obsession with oak leaves, actually.
Yeah.
His hair, his beard is typically composed of oak leaves. But I did not know that's who that was.
Yeah, again, what I'll do is I'm going to throw some pictures in the video so you guys can see who the Green Man is. There's tons of poems and stuff about him. There's also a song by Jethro Tull called Jack in the Green. Robin Hood, it even goes into, stuff about Robin Hood. And yeah, there's a lot of information on the Green Man. It's quite interesting, and everybody has different opinions on it, but they definitely were pulling from that and tried to incorporate it. I'm not sure if it's just because this movie was made in the frame of modernity and there was some sort of symbolism, like maybe they were trying to somehow put something about climate change in there or worshiping nature, so
Right. Well,
who knows?
That I think is fairly certain, but we'll definitely talk about that a little bit later. I know for those of you who follow Jonathan Pajot, he did I believe it was a 2-part video series. It was fairly short, actually. It was only like 30 minutes, 35 minutes all told. But he did an analysis of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight from a symbolic point of view that was pretty interesting, as I recall, but I only listened to it once because that pure symbolic aspect of analysis that he does, while it's interesting, isn't something that pulls my attention as much as it pulls Ian's.
Yeah, I like it because he had someone, bring up the symbolism and how much they loved it. And I think the first thing he said was, I'm going to ruin this for you. And he just went off and, explained that, yes, there's symbolism, and this is something we talked about, but the symbolism
is bad.
Not that it's not doesn't have to do with the story, but the way they're portraying it, if you have seen the movie and if you've read the legend, it's completely different. So with that being said, the poem, Nathan, as we've talked about, is a poem and a story and a legend based on, heroism, virtue, and honor, and we see the complete opposite in the movie. So if you want to, we can start with a brief summary of what the story is for those who haven't read it or seen it, and we'll just give a quick summary if you'd like. Or
So how I'd like to start this, if it's agreeable with you,
Yeah.
is with the setting, because this is the problem with the movie, is the setting is wrong from the get-go. So I will use Tolkien's translation of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and there's a bit that's discussing the setting for several lines. So we'll go over that very quickly, and then we'll give a brief synopsis of the poem, and then move on to the film, and we'll go from there. Hopefully, we don't bore you too terribly much. And if I stumble over my words, forgive me. I'm not the best at reading publicly. Let me see if I can find the section.
So yeah, we're also, like I said before, figuring out the audio video aspects. There might be a little lag. I apologize. We're trying to dial that in. I'm not sure what the issue is, but bear with us. And if it's too much for you, if you're the type of person like me who notices it, then this will be available on Spotify and Apple. And if you're the type of person who can't tell the difference between somebody filming with a potato and someone filming with an actual camera, like this guy, enjoy. So that's where we're at.
So you can film with a potato?
You wouldn't be able to tell.
Why would you not tell me this? Okay.
Anything you filmed would look as if it's been filmed with a potato.
That's why I don't film.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, New Year was yet young, and yestereve had arrived. That day double dainties on the dais were served. When the king was there come with his courtiers to the hall, and the chanting of the choir in the chapel had ended. With loud clamour and cries, both clerks and laymen, Noel announced anew and named it full often. Then the nobles ran anon with New Year gifts. Hansels and Hansels they shouted, and handed them out. Competed for those presents in playful debate, ladies laughed loudly, though they lost the game. And he that won was not woeful, as may well be believed. All this merriment they made till their meat was served. Then they washed, and mannerly went to their seats. Ever the highest for the worthiest as was held to be best. Queen Guinevere the gay was, with grace in the midst of the adorned dais set. Dearly was it arrayed, finest sendal at her sides, as ceiling above her, of true tissue of Toulouse and tapestries of Tharsia, that were embroidered and bound with the brightest gems, one might prove and appraise to purchase for coin, any day. That loveliest lady there on them glanced with eyes of grey, that he found ever one more fair, in sooth might no man say. But Arthur would not eat until all were served. His youth made him so merry with the moods of a boy. He liked light-hearted life, so loved he the less, either long to be lying or long to be seated. So worked on him his young blood and wayward brain. And yet another rule, moreover, was his reason besides, that in pride he had appointed, it pleased him not to eat upon festivals so fair, ere he first were apprised of some strange story or stirring adventure, or some moving marvel that he might believe in, of noble men, knighthood, or new adventures, or a challenger should come, a champion seeking, to join with him in jousting, in jeopardies to set his life against life, each allowing the other the favour of fortune, or she fairer to him. This was the king's custom wherever his court was holden, at each famous feast among his fair company in hall. So his face doth proud appear, and he stands up stout and tall, all young in the new year, much mirth he makes withal.
Yeah, so for people that can't understand a single word of that, like me, break it down a little bit if you can after you get that going, in regards to the setting in the story and the setting in the beginning of the movie. Because in the beginning of the movie, the first thing we see is Sir Gawain in a whorehouse.
Right.
And that is not at all in the legend. They immediately want to portray him as
licentious.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Someone who has already succumbed to temptation and who's a drunk. I'm not saying maybe he didn't enjoy his ale as most knights did in these days, but the first scene for him to be drunk in a whorehouse versus what you've read.
On a feast day.
Yeah, the first scene is actually the woman who he's sleeping with throws water on him and says, "Christ is born." And he replies, "Christ is born," and chases her, like, "Stay here, stay with me. Let's just stay here." I think he says, like he doesn't want to go to mass. He doesn't want to go
to church.
Yeah. So that versus what you just read, if you could maybe explain the setting that is actually true, or, truer to the Christian perspective.
So it's important to note in the setting that it is a feast day that is being celebrated appropriately. One of the first things you see is people running around shouting "Noel, Noel," right? Christ is born, Christ is born. And additionally, and I'm going to keep this brief, but additionally, you also see that gifts are being given. that King Arthur serves his knights. He does not eat, but his knights are given food because he wants to wait for some miraculous thing to occur.
Yeah, he won't eat a piece of meat until something
Something
happens.
interesting happens.
Yeah, whether that be a story told of a knight,
Right.
anything, something happens. And what does happen,
Right. Well, some things do end up happening. But the other thing is that, and this will be contrasted later with how the film portrays things, but the other thing to consider is Guinevere is young and beautiful, and no one in the hall has seen anyone more beautiful than she is.
Yeah,
And
she's-
she is surrounded by beauty as well.
Yeah, she's the fairest in the land, as I believe they say, you
Right.
know.
And King Arthur is young and strong and boisterous, right?
And in the movie, they both look half dead.
Well, Guinevere is in the movie is very haggish.
Yeah.
Not to be too terribly.
She looks
unkind
like
to
she
that
hasn't
actress.
slept in weeks, and yeah.
So the setting is one of joy and beauty and celebration of a high feast. As is said later on, it's the feast of God, right? That's what it's referred to later on in the poem. So that is the setting in the book. But Ian, do you care to discuss a little more of what happens in the story? Because you've gone through most of it, I believe, if not all of it. I've read it a couple times.
In the book?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, in the story, as you said, all of the knights are feasting. King Arthur will not feast until something happens. And what we see is that am I skipping too far ahead by getting to the Green Knight entering already? Because
the Green Knight should enter. Cause,
yes.
So another just a bit of housekeeping. Gawain, for anyone who doesn't know, is King Arthur's nephew.
Yeah.
Right. Without getting too much into the whole origin story for King Arthur, you've got, I believe there are 3 sisters, but I can't remember all their names off the top of my head. But you have Morgan Le Fay, Morgause, and Arthur, who is their half brother, the son of Uther Pendragon. Whereas they are the daughters of Igraine, who is the wife of the Duke of Cornwall, whom Uther seduces, but we won't go there. So in the setting in this feast is that Guinevere and Arthur are sitting at the high table, and on each side of Guinevere, you have King Arthur's nephews. You have Agravain and you have Sir Gawain.
Yeah.
And then the Green Knight enters.
The Green Knight enters, but
Quite a fellow, if I may say so.
yeah, so we see in the legend, as it is written, that when he enters, he is a man. He is a monster of a man, but not a monster.
He's also not quite a giant either.
Yeah,
That's one of the things
exactly.
they said is he's giant-ish, but he's not a giant.
Yeah, and they describe like the outfit he's wearing, and I believe, we could dive into that, but he's dressed regal. He has a certain look about him, a certain vibe, if you will. I know Nathan would love that. No, but in all honesty, the way he enters is not in a way of war, and he even says that.
Right.
He says, "If I was here for war, I would be dressed different."
And none of you could withstand me. You're all
Exactly.
beardless and young.
Exactly.
None of you could withstand me.
But what we see in the movie is when he enters, he is a monster. Like we mentioned before, he looks like the Green Man. He's got, he's massive, and it even looks like his horse is dead, or they try to portray this like zombie-like tree man, and that's just not the case. So yeah, with the Green Knight entering, we see Morgan Le Fay, who is Sir Gawain's mother, but
She's not there in the poem.
yeah.
So what happens is the Green Knight enters and says, "Who's the Lord of the Hall?" Right? And King Arthur says,
He waits a second too.
Right.
He doesn't immediately say, I'm the king. They're all kind of perplexed, like,
"Who is this guy?"
yeah, who's this guy?
And Arthur eventually said, Arthur says, "I am the king of this hall. I welcome you. Would you like to feast with us?" And the Green Knight says, "No, that's not why I'm here." And that's when, as Ian referenced, this whole discussion of combat comes up. And Arthur says, "Well, if you want to fight, any one of my knights will fight you." And the Green Knight says, "Well, no, that's not why I'm here." And he lays this challenge at the feet of all the knights there, and he says, "Okay, here's my axe," because that's the other thing. He has this huge bearded axe with him.
Yeah.
And he says, and it's not a knightly weapon. It's a sketchy looking weapon. Seems kind of barbaric.
Yeah, he doesn't ride in with a lance or
Right.
spear or anything like that. He's not ready for war.
Right.
He's ready for a challenge, for
Right.
a game.
So he holds up his axe and says, "To any knight who accepts my challenge, they can have this weapon. But here's the challenge. any one of your knights today will get to strike me with this weapon, on the condition that on New Year's Day they will meet me a year from now, and I will return the blow. And so all the knights are kind of like, I don't know what I think about that. And in some translations, you kind of get this notion that they're afraid, but in Tolkien's translation, it comes out a little more clearly that they're all kind of unsure of what to say or what to do, because Arthur's the king of the hall, and it kind of seems like he's the one who should be responding to this. But Arthur gets upset because no one responds to the challenge, and the knight starts to mock him. And
I believe he laughs.
right, he laughs at him and starts to call them all a bunch of cowards. And so Arthur goes and takes the axe and about ready to strike the Green Knight with it. And then Sir Gawain says something to the effect of, if you'll will it, may I speak, I'll take up this challenge. And Arthur allows it.
Yeah.
And what happens after that?
Well, he approaches the Green Knight, and with me, I have both visuals in my head, so it's hard for me to kind of
Parse the two?
Yeah, so he approaches the Green Knight, he cuts his head off.
Right. But not before he says, before the Green Knight says, okay, I want you to reaffirm this vow that you will uphold the challenge.
And the challenge is, you strike a blow, whatever that may be, and in a year,
I get to return it.
you will seek me out, and I get to return it. And he, it could be nothing. It could be
Could
him.
be a scratch.
It could be a scratch. It could be him cutting his head off. But Sir Gawain reaffirms this challenge and accepts it. And we'll get into it later. How in the movie it seems like he starts to,
Oh, the movie's just awful.
Yeah. But yeah, so he accepts the challenge. He grabs the axe and he cuts off the Green Knight's head. It falls to the ground. Blood squirts everywhere. Even in the novel, they
It's fairly graphic.
Yeah, it's graphic. But also, before even saying a word, the Green Knight picks his head up and basically says,
Here's where you can find me at the
yeah,
Green
I'll
Chapel.
see you in a year.
Yeah.
And he picks up the head, and the head is laughing as he walks
Right.
off, and he leaves. He leaves, and that's kind of the last image that you're seeing with, and the last image that Sir Gawain it's embedded in his brain. You have to. A year comes pretty quick, as we all know,
Right.
and he's
And
trying.
that's said in the poem is,
Yeah.
a year goes very swiftly. and
Exactly.
You can't call it back.
Exactly. So that's the setting in the poem.
But even so, the year goes quickly, and eventually, and also in the poem, Arthur and Gawain and all the other knights aren't terribly concerned. They're like, well,
Yeah.
that's interesting. We'll see how this plays out. Because no one's ever heard of this knight before. No one knows who he is. No one knows where the Green Chapel is. Even though the Green Knight says, oh yeah, when you come look for me, everyone knows who I am and everyone knows where the chapel can be found.
Yeah, he takes the challenge almost as if it's a joke. Like, this is going to be the last time I see this guy. He's not taking it completely seriously, and then it starts to set in, more and more.
Right. And he goes out. And so, Ian, I know this is the bit that you're super psyched about. So I'll leave it to you. And the passage I have bookmarked here is the one concerning his armoring. But the next interesting portion occurs as Gawain is setting out, right? He's armored up. His equipment is fantastic. His horse his charger is a beautiful horse that's very well armored as well.
Gringolet, I believe,
Yep.
is the horse's name.
Yep, not to be compared with, well, I won't make a joke about Spanish.
Yeah, Gringo. Yeah, and they're both adorned in the most miraculous, I think it's silk and emeralds and stuff that
Sir
took.
Gawain has diamonds on his
Yeah.
the circlet that's on his helmet, like very beautifully appointed.
They say, I think, in the story that it's something that would have taken 7 winters to be made.
Mm-hmm.
So, this was he and others. A lot of people were like, this is what you're going to wear to die.
Well, that's just his armor.
Yeah.
As well. He's a glorious looking knight.
Yeah.
But one of the very interesting things is his shield. And Ian, what is special about his shield, and what does it say about Sir Gawain? Because I know you were super psyched to discuss this.
Yeah, I think the symbolism in this is pretty epic, and especially the way that, when you first see it, and even on our Instagram page, I posted a picture, with a brief description of what we're going to be talking about, and you see Sir Gawain with a pentangle, not a pentagram. I mean, I guess we can kind of get into that. But a pentangle, which is a 5-point star, that is on one side. That is on the back side, I believe.
It's on the front of his shield.
On the front of his shield. Yeah, on the front of his shield. And on the inside is an image of the Mother of God, the Theotokos.
It's an icon of the Theotokos.
Yeah,
It's
exactly.
painted. It's quite explicitly said that it's painted.
Yeah, so a lot of people, when they see this, and the way the movie portrayed it, I'm not sure, but they were showing the pentangle at the same time as they were showing like a shamanic pagan ceremony. And I'm not sure if they were trying to make a contrast between both, but the way they showed it was very dark imagery. It didn't show the virtue, what it means. And
What does a pentagram symbolize, or a pentangle symbolize?
a pentangle in the way the knights wore it, and not in the way that punk rock kids or blue-haired people that work at Starbucks like to portray it. It represents the 5 virtues and how they're always together. They're always entangled together. We have the 5 virtues also, which would be generosity, chastity, courtesy, fellowship or friendship, and piety. And we also know that it represents the 5 wounds of Christ and the 5 joys of Mary, the Mother of God.
To whom Sir Gawain is particularly devoted, as we see with him having an icon on
Yeah.
the inside of his shield. Because one of the things that the poem also talks about,
Which we don't see in the movie,
Right.
I don't think at all.
well, you see the icon once or twice.
Yeah, but other stuff, the
Right.
praying to the Mother of God.
Right. But one of the things that's said in the poem is whenever Gawain is, shall we say, feeling that his luck is pressed, or whenever he's becoming discouraged, especially in battle, he looks at the icon of the Mother of God, he hoists his shield, looks at the icon of the Mother of God, and that
Yeah.
strengthens him again. Do you have that passage? If you
I do have something that I want to read, and it talks about the pentangle, and it says, they then brought him his shield. This is after he's been, fully armored. They then brought him his shield that was bright gules, jewels, Gules, I'm not sure how to pronounce that, with the pentangle, charged on it in pure gold. He took it by the baldric and slung it around his neck, and it was the last fitting touch in his splendid array. And why the pentangle was Gawain's special emblem must be explained, even though the story waits. It is a sign that Solomon devised of old as a token of fidelity, of which it is a fit emblem, for it is a figure that has 5 points, and each line in it overlaps and locks with another. And wherever you start on it, it is endless. And everywhere the English call it the endless knot. So it was fitting for Gawain and his famous device. Since Gawain was known for a good knight, faithful in 5 ways and 5 times in each way, he was like refined gold, pure from any vileness, and radiant with all virtues, which, again, in the movie, even
unequivocally not the case.
the first scene is him, in a
We've
brothel.
said, yeah.
Therefore, he bore the pentangle as his emblem, as the truest and gentlest in speech of all the knights. So yeah, I found that interesting because we see right away in society that there's an inversion of the pentagram, and it's like it doesn't have anything to do with virtue or any of the the 5 virtues: generosity, chastity, courtesy, fellowship, friendship, and piety. It's a satanic symbol. It's been turned into a satanic
Because
satanic,
it's been
and it
inverted.
yeah,
quite
and
literally.
exactly, yeah. But it also originally was not a satanic symbol at all. And we see this, like we mentioned earlier. There's a lot of symbols in Christianity that have been taken by the pagans and turned into things that are no longer sacred. And there's also things that we have re-sanctified from paganism. So
Well, you'll hear people say that with the Celtic cross, right? They'll say,
Yeah.
"Oh, well, that to the Celts that didn't symbolize the crucifixion of Christ and the redemption of mankind. That symbolized the intersection of heaven and earth." And I'm like, "Do you know what the incarnation is?"
it is
It
quite
doesn't-
literally that.
Yeah. It's like, congratulations. How does it feel to shoot yourself in the foot with that?
Yeah. Both fully divine and fully human, heaven and earth.
Right.
As above, so below.
Right.
So yeah, which also, funny enough, at the old place we lived at, that was our neighbor's Wi-Fi password, and they're great people, but they're not Christian at all.
Right.
But it's like even things like sayings like "as above, so below." It's like those have been taken away from a Christian perspective.
Well, the pagans try to take those away from Christianity, and it's like they go, "Yeah, we're going to turn this back to its original meaning." And it's like, well, the original meaning, as you call it, is one, not a thing that even really exists, and in the sense that they mean, because they're trying to be both shall we say, neo-pagan, but also very historically minded, scientifically historically minded, which is hilarious. But
Yeah.
if you go back to quote unquote the original usage or the original meaning, that's going to lead you back to Christ, because interestingly, it didn't stay in the original interpretation for a reason.
Yeah. But what we were saying earlier, like the film is a complete opposite of the poem.
Right.
And we can, I don't know if you want to touch on this first about how, he succeeds in all of the tests minus the last one.
We'll move on a little bit in the narrative, but once he's armored,
Yeah.
he goes out, and he goes out on Michaelmas, which for anyone who doesn't know is September 29th, if my memory is correct. Let me check my notes. Yeah, September 29th. So interestingly, the beginning of autumn.
Yeah.
Right. So he goes out, and he spends, what we find out later is 3.5 months more, about 3 months, or just shy of 3 months, trying to figure out where this green chapel is. And he passes out of Wales, Logres as they call it in this story. He passes out of King Arthur's country, and eventually, after many adventures, which include fighting, what does he have down?
Wild boars, bears, beasts, dragons,
trolls,
ogres.
giants.
Yeah, exactly. A whole slew of things.
All of the monsters.
Sleeping in his armor in the cold, praying to the Mother of God for shelter. All these things that we don't see at all in the film. And what I was going to say is that the whole story is full of challenge and temptations, of which he overcomes.
Right. And it's so after a long time. So I'm wanting to say it's Christmas Day, actually.
Yeah.
It's Christmas Day, and as far as his prayers go, which this is one of numerous times when he prays. He prays to the Mother of God, and I believe it's to St. Julian. But he also says an Our Father, a Hail Mary, and he prays the Creed, right? The Nicene Creed. And he asks God to provide him shelter and a place to attend Mass. That's what's foremost on his mind. He doesn't want to be without the services and the sacraments on this feast day. So on Christmas, on the Nativity of Christ, or the Feast of God, as his soon-to-be host will refer to it. And lo and behold, not terribly long after praying this, he finds this massive castle, the most beautiful castle that he's ever seen. And he seeks shelter there, and he's granted shelter, and he meets the Lord of the castle.
Yeah.
And that's where the story gets really, really interesting. Not to say that it hasn't been prior.
Yeah, so there's a passage in here that I want to read about when he's traveling. It says, "The knight on Gringolet passed on his way beneath them," and it's referring to birds that sat shivering on bare twigs, piping a pitiful little song as the cold nipped them, through the swamp and mire all by himself, and troubled about how he was to keep Christmas if he could not manage to see the due service of the Lord, who on the same night was born of a maiden to heal all our sorrows. And so with a sigh he said, I beseech you, Lord Christ and Mary, gentlest mother so dear, to bring me to some shelter where I may devoutly hear the Mass and Matins tomorrow. Humbly I ask it, and say straightway my Pater Noster and
The Our Father.
And the Our Father and the Creed. He rode on, praying as he rode, and confessed his sins, and crossed himself, saying, The cross of Christ be my good speed. He had crossed himself but 3 times when he was aware, through the trees of a dwelling circled by a moat, standing on a mound that rose from a piece of meadowland, shut in under the boughs of many great trees that closed in round the moat. It was a castle, the fairest that ever a knight owned, built in a clearing with a park all round it, and round the park a stout palisade of spikes that took in more than 2 miles of forest. Gawain looked at the stronghold from that side, and saw it shimmering and shining through the fair oaks. And then he reverently took off his helmet, and gave devout thanks to Jesus and St. Julian, as Nathan said, Gentle Lord and gentle Saint, who had thus shown him kindness and heard his prayer. Now, said he, grant me good lodging. And with that he touched Gringolet with his golden spurs, and made his way, as chance would have it, to the chief gate, which brought him swiftly to the end of the drawbridge. And he saw the bridge firmly pulled up, and the gate shut fast, and the solid walls that feared no blast of tempest. So yeah, you see in the book and in the poem that he's a very devout Christian, praying, asking for help from the saints.
This is far from the first reference to him praying his devotion to God.
Yeah, and the only
quite
thing
far.
that we see, like I've said numerous times in the beginning of the film, is them mocking God in the brothel when the woman throws water on him because he's drunk to wake him up and says, "Christ is born." And that's about the only time we see anything besides when he's traveling and he decides to get directions from a beggar and doesn't want to give the beggar any money. And he doesn't,
Right.
he's not, he shows no almsgiving. So later on, this beggar then robs him and stomps on the icon of the Mother of God.
breaking it in half, actually.
Yes,
which is
so
one. I mean, as great of a blasphemy as that is, it is not the only one that we will discuss. There's one that raises my ire even more that ought not, because blaspheming and treating the Mother of God in such a way is a pretty terrible thing to do. But
yeah.
even further, I think, is the one that occurs.
And most times in general, like during these types of stories, they celebrate the joy of spring and summer. But we notice that the author, whoever he may be, which I think they found a few other manuscripts from him, including the Pearl.
Actually, the oldest manuscript of this, if my memory is correct, is the one that has Pearl and Beowulf.
Yeah.
So that's I want to say
Fourth-
14th or 15th century
Yeah, 14th.
copy.
But we see that usually summer and spring are portrayed, but the poet chose to evoke this story within midwinter in northern England. And
Which is miserably cold.
exactly.
If
And
you've ever been.
so the rugged terrain and weather, they became major factors in Sir Gawain's spiritual life, in his spiritual journey, as well as his physical journey to find the Green Knight. So thus we end up at the castle. Who does the castle belong to?
The castle belongs to a guy named Bergerac.
Who is,
Well, spoiler, he is the Green Knight.
exactly.
But obviously Gawain doesn't know that.
Yeah.
So he's given a fine welcome. Even though he's never heard of Sir Bergerac, he's never heard of this castle before. Everyone there knows him and says, "You are the most virtuous and one of the greatest knights."
Yeah,
It
he
is such an
even
honor
asks,
to be here.
he's like, I need you to ask the king if I can come in. And they say, oh, there's no need to ask. And they all, I think, bow before him or open
Right.
the gates. Many people come down. They help him with his,
Well, they still ask. He says, "Well, still go
Yeah.
ask, please."
but they help him with his gear. They bring his horse in. They do all these things. So they it's like as if they expect him. They know he's coming. So yeah.
Which, if you're paying attention to the beginning of the poem, they are expecting him.
Yeah.
Because Sir Bergerac knows that he is an honorable knight and he will come. But they're received, interestingly, the lady of the castle, Sir Bergerac's wife, Sir Gawain notes that she, at least to his eyes, seems even more beautiful than Queen Guinevere, which is interesting, and sets up the later interactions in the poem. But how shall I say? The narrative proceeds in that Sir Bergerac entertains Sir Gawain, gives him a place to sleep, provides a feast in his honor, effectively, and then says, "Why don't you stay with us for a while? You're such a storied knight, you ought to stay with us." And Sir Gawain says, I really can't. I have an errand. I have to find the Green Chapel, and if I don't, I'm going to have voided my knightly honor, and that's not going to be good. And Sir Bergerac says, "What?"
This is when he challenges him?
No.
Or
No, Sir Bergerac says, "Oh, well, you're in great luck. The Green Chapel is 2 miles away
Yeah, he
from
says-
my castle.
he says
it's
you're-
right, it's literally right here.
Yeah.
Hang out for a couple days, celebrate the feast with us, and on New Year's Day, you can go. And I'll even give you someone I'll give you an escort to show you where it is."
yeah, and in the book, it's not a fox.
Well,
Right?
the fox plays. I don't know if we'll get a chance to touch on the fox.
Well, they
because-
use the fox in the movie as like a spirit guide, someone who
it's-
ends up talking to him at one point in a human voice. It's
creepy,
Yeah.
demonic. But so what happens? They then set this accord, and that is Sir Bergerac tells Sir Gawain, "Okay, I'm going to go hunting every day, and whatever I get, whatever I win, I'm going to give to you, and you stay in the castle and take your leisure, hang out, drink, feast, talk to my wife, talk to the people here, and whatever you win, if you win anything, you give to me. We'll have an exchange of gifts."
yeah, this is what is known as the exchanging of gifts.
Right. And we'll do this for 3 days, right? And that puts them on New Year's Eve. That will end on New Year's Eve.
Yeah. the day before
he has to be at the Green Chapel.
Exactly.
So
Which just happens to be a few miles away.
Curious. So the first day, Sir Bergerac goes out and he kills a number of deer.
Yeah,
And
I think the first animal he brings back is a deer.
He brings in the poem he brings back several.
Yeah.
But he brings them back, and for anyone who, if you have children and you're listening to this and they want to read this poem, the discussion on what happens after they kill the deer is fairly, shall we say, graphic.
Yeah.
So if your kids have never butchered an animal before, that might be kind of an unpleasant thing for them to read.
So he comes back, the Lord.
Bergerac,
the Lord comes back with deer, with venison,
Right.
for Sir Gawain, and in exchange, while the Lord is gone, the wife is. This is part of his test.
Right.
She is not necessarily a temptress in her original, demeanor, but this is all part of the test, and she is trying to tempt Sir Gawain numerous times, and all she ends up getting
Is a kiss.
is a kiss. Exactly.
Interestingly, because she kind of shames him.
Yeah.
Because,
But he also doesn't want to make her feel,
Well, there's a line in there where he says, I don't want to lose my knightly reputation.
Yeah.
There's a phrase that they use, and I don't remember what it is, but he says, I don't want to lose my reputation, but I also don't want to surrender my virtue.
Exactly.
And he goes, and I would rather lose the former than the latter.
Yeah.
So
the first day.
So the first day, she kind of shames him into giving her a kiss because when she leaves, because she's cornered him in bed, actually. He's sleeping, and she sneaks into his chambers and sits on the edge of the bed and won't let him get up and dress. And he doesn't want to scandalize her, so he doesn't
Exactly.
get out of bed, even though he asks her to leave so he can dress. But when she leaves, after they've bantered back and forth for several hours, it seems, she kind of says, "Oh, well, obviously you're not Sir Gawain." And he's like, "What makes you say that?" And she goes, "Well, it's ridiculous to me that anyone pretending to be Sir Gawain would let a lady who has been trying to win him as lover leave without giving a kiss." And he goes, "Oh, well, if you want one, I'll give you one. So just ask." And she goes, and so he gives her a kiss. And Sir Bergerac comes home, presents the venison.
And guess who gets a kiss?
Gawain throws his arms around Sir Bergerac's neck and gives him a kiss.
Exactly. And at first he doesn't understand. I mean, he probably does.
He makes all kinds of snide comments.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's, he praises Gawain's friendship. And so, again, the next day.
He goes out again. He goes hunting, and I believe he brings home a boar.
A boar.
The second day.
Yep. He brings home a boar and that's actually one of my favorite parts in the story is Bergerac killing the boar, because the boar kills a lot of his dogs.
Yeah.
It wounds a lot of his men.
If you guys know anything about boars, they're
Going after
brutal.
him with a sword is you've got some balls if you do that.
They usually go for your eyes or your throat because they're like.
They're omnivorous. They'll kill you.
Yeah, and also they don't have the best vision, and we have javelinas here, and they don't have the best vision, but they know what to do to take you out. So him bringing home a boar is definitely a big feat. Getting a deer, it's no easy feat, right. But it's a lot easier than a wild boar. Finding one, right. Killing one.
Deer generally don't kill you.
No, they kind of. I mean, they've been known to, but they generally stand there.
Well, that's a different story.
They're easier to track.
Right. So he brings home a boar, but in the meantime.
The Lord's wife is still tempting Sir Gawain.
Has still been trying to seduce Sir Gawain.
Yeah.
And she goes pretty hard this time.
Also, there is many ways to say his name, and I believe in the movie what do they call him? I say Gawain, you say Gawain.
That's just how I've heard it.
Yeah.
That's how I say it. You also say Augustine, and I say
Augustine. I say both, but yeah. So yeah. Sorry, I just noticed in the movie. Do you remember what they call him?
I don't recall.
Gawain? They say like Gawain or something very weird.
I'm trying really hard to not remember a lot of that movie because
so you're leaving that up to me.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Well, you've seen it
3 or 4 times.
4
times.
Like yeah. I'm judging you so hard right now. So the same scene repeats itself in Sir Gawain's room. The lady tries to seduce him. He resists, but throughout the course of this dialogue, he gives her 2 kisses. So at the end of that, when Sir Bergerac comes home, presents Sir Gawain with the boar, Gawain gives him 2 kisses. And again, Sir Bergerac compliments him and says, wow, if you're this successful compared to me when I go out hunting, you're going to be a very rich man in very short order.
Yeah.
Which is a hilarious comment, I think. But third day, but either way, they part as friends. Sir Gawain tries to then say, okay, well, I really need to leave tomorrow because I really have to get to the Green Chapel. I don't want to be late. I cannot break my vow. And Sir Bergerac reiterates again, it's
It's down the road.
Close. It's down the road a couple of miles. I will give you a guide.
I'll get you an Uber.
You'll I hate that.
Wouldn't be surprised if that was in the movie.
Yeah.
Also, quick note, we lost video for a moment, but it's back up, so I apologize.
But either way, so Sir Gawain tries to bow out and leave early, and Sir Bergerac says, okay, well, no, I'll square you away. I will get you there on time. You will not be late for your meeting, for your tryst, as they call it. And so Gawain says, okay, I'll stay. And Sir Bergerac then says, all right, but also, you're a knight of your word, yes? And he goes, yes. He says, okay, so are you down to finish our game?
Yeah.
I'm going to go hunt tomorrow.
Day 3.
Whatever I bring back is yours. Whatever you acquire while you're here, you're going to give to me, right? Sir Gawain says, yeah, for sure, 110%. So the same thing kind of happens, but this time, this is the only time that you have a discussion given to Sir Bergerac's wife dressing herself, and she shows up, interestingly, as a maid. She doesn't wear anything in her hair, which is the symbol of someone who's unmarried. So she shows up and tries really, really hard to seduce Sir Gawain, and she almost succeeds, but she gets 3 kisses from him, if my memory's correct, and insists on giving him another gift. And he says, no, I can't take anything from you.
And this gift plays a significant role, symbolically.
Right.
But the gift is a green girdle.
Right. Well,
Which
first
is,
she offers him a ruby ring, a ring of red gold with a ruby in it. She tries to give this to him, and Gawain says, absolutely not. I will not take this. And the lady pretends to be, or I won't say pretends, the lady becomes very offended and says, what? Why aren't you going to give this to me? Like, I'll give you this, you give me your gauntlet, one of your gloves. And he says, no, I'm not going to do that. I can't take anything from you. And she starts to get upset and says, okay, well, you think that I am worthless or something like that. And he says, no, far from it. I just can't accept one of these gifts. And she says, okay, well, how about I give you something that's of no value? I'll give you my girdle, my belt. And he goes, I don't know about that. And she goes, well, this doesn't appear to have any monetary value, which it doesn't.
No.
But it possesses a particular virtue. What is that virtue that it possesses?
It'll protect him.
He can't be killed while he's wearing it.
Indefinitely. So,
right.
Which also, this is all part of the test, as you'll come to find out,
Because he knows he's going to get his head chopped off.
Yeah, and she's obviously in on this with her husband,
right?
Who is the Green Knight,
right.
But Sir Gawain does not know that yet.
Right.
So she gives him the green girdle.
So this is his moment of temptation. He goes,
the biggest moment of temptation.
Right. I mean, he's preserved his.
We also don't see any of that in the film. We don't see the multiple days. We just see one interaction between.
One thoroughly
they don't even. I don't.
Interaction.
Yeah, they mention the exchange of gifts. The Lord leaves, and then you see Sir Gawain in the room with the lady, and it ends very disgusting. Let's just.
Sir Gawain doesn't maintain his chastity
at all in any way. It's a very vulgar scene. It's brief, but it's vulgar, and it just kind of, it's
worthless.
Yeah,
it has no business being in the film for a number of reasons.
Well, besides the fact that it's Hollywood and it's rated R, and they had to throw something perverse in there. Besides
all
the brothel. Yeah, exactly. So day 3, he receives the girdle. A few more kisses to the lady. The Lord comes back, and I believe he comes back with
a fox hide.
Yeah, a fox hide.
Interestingly, the only animal that's named, I believe the fox's name is. Let me see if I can find it.
But yeah, if you guys are enjoying this video, make sure to like and subscribe.
Yeah, the fox is named Reynard. Which is interesting. I don't know why the fox is named. That will be a discussion we can have at some other point with somebody else that might know the answer to that question.
Yeah.
And it's actually a pretty cool pursuit scene as well. Because the fox is obviously a very sly animal, a very difficult animal to catch and kill. And the king, not the king, Sir Bergerac finally kills it and brings back the fox hide and gives it to Sir Gawain, and Sir Gawain only gives Sir Bergerac 3 kisses,
And not the girdle.
not the girdle. And the next day, Sir Gawain rises early, not having slept very well, after being feasted well into the night by Sir Bergerac.
Do you think his lack of sleep is due to the fact that he knows he didn't keep his word?
I don't know.
Or that he's worried about, getting to the Green Chapel? They don't really specify any of that, but they leave it open for interpretation.
The poem is that, or the commentary in the poem is that he had much to occupy his mind. So it could have been that. But there's also obviously a number of other things, such as a very large, sharp axe coming down in the back of his neck here shortly.
Yeah.
And how he's going to resolve that particular situation, because he obviously is not the kind of man who, after having his head hacked off, can pick it up and to walk away with it.
No.
So he doesn't sleep well. He rises early, armors, goes to confession.
Which we don't see in the movie again.
Right. Goes to confession, and then he's given high praise in the farewells when he leaves the castle, but he's also given a guide. And at the last minute, the guide, when they get to where the guide is going to leave, he says, okay, here in this valley, the chapel is down there. You follow these directions, you'll get to the chapel, but I'm not going down there, because the knight that lives there is a terrible, heathen, violent man. He will kill anyone that walks past or that comes past to the Green Chapel. And the squire even then says to Sir Gawain, if you don't heed my warning, or if you heed my warning, you can leave here and I will tell no one. I will say that you went and fought, or you went and fulfilled your duty. I don't know how it turned out, but he went and fulfilled his duty. I will not say anything to anyone.
Yeah, he won't snitch.
Yeah. And Sir Gawain effectively rebukes him and says, whatever my weird is, whatever my fate is, that's in God's hands. I will not break this vow.
Yeah, and there's a quote in the version that I'm reading that you've read numerous times, and it says, a man must stand up to his fate, whether it bring good or ill.
Right.
So no matter what happens, and like we've said before, it could be a scratch, it could be his beheading, or it could be nothing. Maybe the Green Knight's not even there. But either way, he understands his promise, and he allows God's will to take him where he needs to go.
Right. So he goes,
because he's virtuous, and we don't see that in the film at all.
Well, in the film, he is the furthest thing from virtuous.
Yeah.
Like he is. It's bad.
Yeah, he fails at all things but the final task, which we'll get to. But in the poem, he succeeds in all tasks, but
except for one.
But fails in one, which we'll get to. So they're complete opposites. It's it's an inversion. The film is an inversion of the truth.
So Sir Gawain goes down into the valley. He finds the chapel, which actually ends up looking very much like a dolmen. Which, if you don't know what that is, it's kind of like it's an old Celtic tomb.
Yeah.
With pillars, with a couple of stone pillars, and then a large stone slab as a roof.
It's not a cathedral.
Right. It's not a chapel. It's not what you're thinking of as a chapel.
Yeah.
So this happens. He goes down, sees this place, and he thinks this is where Satan would say Matt.
This is where I die.
This is where, not even that. It's like, he's like, yeah, I'm going to die here, but also this is a terrible place. Like, this is a demonic place.
Yeah.
This is evil. And he runs into the Green Knight there. And they both affirm their willingness to carry out the vow that they made to one another a year prior. And Sir Gawain takes his helmet off, kneels before the Green Knight, and the Green Knight has another axe.
He moves his hair,
right, just
so
like
that
the Green Knight.
Yeah, so that he can see,
some flesh.
Flesh. But yeah,
and so the Green Knight squares up to him, takes his axe, and starts to take a swing. But something interesting happens. What is that?
Yeah, Sir Gawain, how do you say it? Gawain. He doesn't necessarily. It's not a full flinch.
He doesn't jerk away, but he kind of he like the way the story and the poem describe it. He kind of like tenses his shoulders up and kind of goes to protect himself a little bit. Like
exactly.
You know how when you're boxing, you kind of tighten your shoulders up around your neck to protect yourself a little bit. That's kind of what he does. Does the Green Knight stop with the swing?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah. So the first one starts making fun of him.
The first one we could say Sir Gawain flinches, so to speak, and then the second swing, the Green Knight misses, and I believe his axe ends up in the ground. He pulls it out.
But throughout this entire time, he's talking smack to Sir Gawain. He's
Yeah.
like, "Oh yeah, you're just a coward. You're afraid to take a blow. I didn't flinch when you swung at me when
Exactly.
you cut my head off."
Yeah.
And
And he cut
Gawain's
his-
getting more irritated.
He cut his head clean off.
Yeah.
So then the third strike comes, and
Sir Gawain takes it.
yeah, he takes it. He doesn't flinch. But all that the Green Knight does, not all, because it's very symbolic, he leaves a small scratch,
Yeah,
a small nick on the back of his neck.
It's not even that he misses the strike. It's
He
kind
goes
of like
down and stops.
He taps him
Yeah.
a little bit. Like he taps him on the side of the neck a little bit.
And the reason for this,
Well, but before we get into the reason, Gawain, when that happens, gets mad
oh yeah, he's
because he sees the blood dripping into the snow, and he goes, "Okay, you returned the blow, and just because you're weak and you are not good at this."
he draws his sword, doesn't
Yeah,
he?
he draws his sword, pulls his helmet on, gets his shield, and is like, "Okay, if you come at me again, I'm going to return the blow. I'm not
Yeah.
going to take it."
This
So-
will be a duel.
Yeah, you might kill me, but I'm going to try to kill you again.
Yeah. So the reason the Green Knight, I mean, I can't speak the exact reason, but as to why he doesn't behead him. I mean, I guess the reason he doesn't behead him is because he passed all the tests.
Right.
You know, he kept his he kept chaste. He lived up to his word.
Well, he missed twice, which is interesting because the Green Knight is trying to is using his wife to seduce Sir Gawain, is what
Yeah.
we're going to find out here in a moment. And the first two times, the seduction utterly misses.
But the third time,
The third time, though, it comes closer to succeeding.
Yeah.
And it doesn't succeed because Sir Gawain is unchaste. It succeeds because Sir Gawain is afraid to die.
yeah. And he also doesn't want to, for lack of better terms, like embarrass the lady. You know, like she's obviously been trying for a few days.
Right.
You know, and he wants to. Yeah, he doesn't want it, like you said. He doesn't mind losing his reputation as a knight, but he doesn't want to embarrass the lady.
Right. That's part of what he doesn't wish to do. So that's why. And at this point, after Sir Gawain gets upset and says, "Okay, if you look at me so much as sideways again, we're going to have a fight."
Yeah.
Sir Bergerac, who is the Green Knight, as we've said before, reveals himself to Sir Gawain. He says, "Ah, I am Sir Bergerac. I am the lord of the castle. The lady who flirted with you and tried to seduce you is my wife. Here's how everything played out." And Gawain is shocked.
Yeah,
He didn't expect
But
that.
he passed the test of seduction of the Green Knight. But the one thing that he did not give up, and this is why there was the little nick on the back of his neck, was because of the girdle.
Right.
He doesn't.
Because he took the girdle.
He took the girdle, did not give it as an exchange of gifts, and also, in the moment, didn't take it off or do anything or give it to him prior. And in
But
the
now he offers it back.
exactly. But in the film, what we see is him cowering during this whole interaction, having a vision of him becoming king and children, etc., etc. And we just see that, you know, he doesn't want to live up to what he's done. And throughout the whole film, there's lots of things that, you know, that point us to him not being a knight, him being more of a coward than a knight. So what he does is when the Green Knight goes for the blow, he says, wait.
He freaks out.
He freaks out. He runs off, which is part of the vision. But then it comes back to, you know, the actual moment where the Green Knight is going to take the blow. And he says, you know, wait a second. Takes off the girdle, puts it in front of him.
and then the
And
Green Knight kills him.
yeah, exactly. He says, off with your head.
Although I would go so far to say, well,
But it's also
we'll discuss the movie
it's,
here in a minute.
Yeah, it's also open for interpretation because it's hard to tell if he does behead him or if it's just symbolic
Just a joke.
of him being a coward, you know?
So what Sir Gawain says after the other night, after Sir Bergerac has explained what's happened, where does it start? The other stern knight in a study then stood a long while. In such grief and disgust he had a grew in his heart. All the blood from his breast and his blush mingled, and he shrank into himself with shame at that speech. The first words on that field that he found then to say were, "Cursed be ye, coveting and cowardice also. In you is vileness and vice that virtue destroyeth." He took then the treacherous thing, and untying the knot, fiercely flung he the belt at the feet of the knight. "See there the falsifier, and foul be its fate. Through care for thy blow, cowardice brought me to consent to coveting, my true kind to forsake, which is free hand and faithful word that are fitting to knights." So, interestingly, he confesses to Bergerac after he's confessed to a priest, because that's his penance, right? I have done wrong to you. And by that, I have destroyed the virtue of my knighthood, which is a big problem. But have you any thoughts on that, Ian? Okay, so at that point, Sir Bergerac, they have another conversation, and Bergerac insists on telling Sir Gawain, everything is forgiven, your penance has been paid, you don't need to apologize to me. And he then reveals that the entire purpose behind this game has been to try to kill Queen Guinevere.
Yeah.
Which is crazy. So what you have to do is go back to the beginning of the poem and realize that in the aftermath of Sir Bergerac picking up his head and saying, okay, so meet me at the Green Chapel in a year and a couple of days, Guinevere is kind of put off by this. She's a bit disconcerted, to use my favorite word. And King Arthur says to her, well, we got to have our fun. Now we can celebrate the feast. And he kind of blows it off. But what Sir Bergerac tells Gawain is, oh yeah, by the way, this change that you see, because obviously I'm not a giant green man with a huge Danish axe. Like, that's not what I actually am. I am Sir Bergerac, the guy that you met at the castle. The knight that you met at the castle a few days ago.
Do they ever talk about how he becomes the Green Knight?
Well, Morgan Le Fay does it to him.
Yeah.
Because she wants that whole event to cause Guinevere to die.
Mm-hmm.
To die of fright, because she hates her so much.
So in a way, she has cursed.
Well, she hasn't cursed him. She just allowed him to change. She allowed Sir Bergerac to change into that form to kind of do this. And he goes, well, she's Morgan Le Fay is a respected member of my court. You will have seen her as kind of this old lady that is with my queen, that is with my wife.
And like you mentioned earlier, King Arthur is her half-brother.
Right.
But in a lot of stories, in Arthurian legends, she was an apprentice under Merlin.
Right. Well, she's always this strange character that sometimes is good, because at the end of some of the Arthurian legends, she is one of the ladies who comes to take Arthur to Avalon. But at other points, she's definitely not his friend. She's trying to cause all of these problems.
Such as kill his wife.
Such as kill his wife on multiple occasions, because she really doesn't like Guinevere for some reason. But that is revealed, and Sir Bergerac begs Gawain to come back to the castle. He says, you're highly respected. My people love you, and I love you. You are a good knight. You are a virtuous knight. I would like you to come back and stay with us. And Gawain refuses, and after many adventures, he goes, he is also told by Sir Bergerac, Bergerac's not going to accept the girdle back. He goes, no, it was given to you. You keep it. So Gawain keeps it as a mark of his shame.
Yeah, he wears it on his arm as he enters back into the kingdom.
Well, he actually wears it as a baldric, so it's like a sash across his chest.
Yeah.
And he brings it back.
There might be different interpretations, but either way, he wears it as a mark of shame, He's not proud.
He brings it back to Camelot, and he tells then King Arthur and the other knights, here's what happened. And he gives this speech about how he's shamed and he's no longer a virtuous knight. And interestingly, all of the knights, they kind of laugh at him a little bit because he's taking it too seriously. And what they end up doing is all of the lords and all of the knights and ladies of Camelot wear a green sash or a green girdle to indicate that is to pay honor to Sir Gawain, which is pretty interesting. But thoughts, comments, concerns, snarky remarks, and then we'll talk about the movie and how the movie is actual cultural appropriation in the wrong way.
Well, I just wanted to say once again, thank you for everybody who's watching, subscribing. We now have a Patreon, which I'll put in the description, and still dealing with, like I've said, minor technical issues. So some of the video was not there during this, but it'll be available on Spotify. I think I've fixed the issue. It just comes down to gear, learning new gear, and kind of figuring out how everything flows together. Hopefully within the next few episodes, we'll have that figured out. But make sure you like, subscribe, share it. And for Patreon members, there's 3 different tiers. They all get you exclusive access, some of them more so than others. And also, if you become a VIP Patreon member, you get every issue of the magazine, exclusive content, live Q&As. We've been discussing maybe doing some sort of special stuff per Patreon, talking about your patron saint, doing maybe like a one-on-one video with you, having you on the videos. stuff like that. So Nathan has some other ideas too in regards to like artistic stuff. And yeah, we have a lot of stuff planned. I have a few interviews coming up. Father John Valdez, Death to the World. We are speaking with Richard Rowland, which is hopefully going to happen. I'm interviewing an ultra runner who is a very devout.
Why would you have an ultra runner on here?
He's a very
Runners are insane.
Well, exactly.
By definition.
Yeah, he's a very devout Christian. He's not Orthodox, but I love how much he puts Christ at the center of his life, and he's definitely a warrior for Christ. So that's something we're going to talk about. We're going to have him on. I'm doing some stuff with David Patrick Harry, and then we're going to do some stuff with David Patrick Harry. There's a few other guests that I can't quite mention yet, as I don't have a date or a definite answer, but those are in the works. So yeah, lots of things happening. And yeah, make sure to check out the website orthodoxlogos.com. Yeah, just do a little housekeeping to get it out of the way.
Ian's got some cool stuff on there. The notebook, I'll just show you real quick. The notebook that I'm using to keep my notes for the podcast and various other writing projects is right here. It's awesome. And for anyone who doesn't know, well, most of you don't know, I presume, because I don't make it a habit of putting my very personal foibles on the internet, but I usually, if I'm writing with a pen, I use a fountain pen because it's easier on my hands. I've broken my dominant hand a number of times because I'm an idiot, and ballpoint pens hurt a lot to use. But the problem with fountain pens is they tend to, if you've got lower quality paper, they bleed through, the ink bleeds through, and that's kind of frustrating. This paper, I've filled it up with all kinds of cursive. It does not bleed through at all. So here's the front, there's the back. No bleed through at all. Very thin paper.
Yeah, it's quality paper. So I'm going to add a few more different designs for the notebook. I didn't know that they weren't lined, but I'll make an option for lined, or I guess you would consider that like a dotted.
It's almost like a graph kind of thing, but I actually like that a lot.
It gives you an outline, but it's not,
It's an awesome notebook, guys. If you write with a fountain pen or just like high quality notebooks, this is fantastic.
Yeah. And also just picked up labels for the beard oil. I've been minimizing what's on the website. I really want to focus on the YouTube podcast and have a few items, but I've noticed that, and this is no blow at people that are doing it, but I've noticed a lot of like Orthodox gear and apparel coming out recently, and of course I was inspired by people who were doing these things, but like Father John Valdez, Death to the World, those are like the OGs, and it really spoke to me. But it seems like it's becoming a fad, and I don't mean that in necessarily a negative way, because we're glorifying God,
It's
but
become commonplace.
Exactly. And I kind of want to step away from that, and I want to have things that are more edifying. So yeah, check out the website. There's a lot on there, a lot that won't be on there. So this is your chance to get the things that will no longer be on there. But yeah, in regards to the rest of the podcast, I just wanted to get the housekeeping out of the way. Some of the things that I noticed is that Sir Gawain becomes, so to speak, the prey in the movie. He's not virtuous as a knight.
Well, so we're going to give a brief synopsis of the film first, and then kind of do a compare and contrast.
Yeah, we can. I mean, I know we kind of touched on it throughout, but yeah.
If you want to give a brief synopsis, I am not a film guy, so I don't disagree with Ian. The film was shot well.
Yeah.
But the story was garbage.
I mean, of course it was shot well. It was probably a $5 million budget with the most insane cameras and lighting. Right. And, as far as an artistic standpoint goes, it was beautifully filmed cinematically. The angles, the, depth of field, everything they used was beautiful. But as a Christian,
not so bueno.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a weird balance. It's a weird duality, if you will, where I loved the movie. I hated the movie, if that makes any sense. So a brief synopsis. I don't know. I guess we can both touch on it. Just everything about the movie is a complete inversion of the story.
Can I start with an overall critique real fast? And once I've said this will.
Yeah, and also let's see where we're at. We're at an hour and 8. Maybe we could make the rest of this. No, this will be available for everybody. We're going to start doing, little like part 2s or special videos for Patreon. Not that it's behind like a paywall necessarily, but it does help us with continuing the website and gear and everything else. But for this one, we'll just go ahead and
Right.
we'll just keep going with it. Yeah,
Okay, so
because I know we're going to touch on Saint Winifred.
that's my okay. So I won't say that this is the only critique I have because the Saint Winifred one was like, I can fall into a towering rage on
Yeah.
occasion, and I was very upset when that.
I mean,
came
not
around.
not to out you, but your prayer rope was in hand. Let's,
I
let's
wasn't
leave
happy.
it there.
I
You
wasn't-
were
I
not
wasn't happy.
You were
I was
not
very
happy.
upset.
And I thought the scene in there wasn't a bad scene, but it was also completely irrelevant and also very blasphemous. It's like
It was a bad scene.
that's where that's where I have a hard time. Like, I loved the way it was filmed. I loved kind of the message of it, but also in regards to the legend, it's completely out of place. You know, it's also another way that we see them replacing the masculine hero with, you know, with like a feminine goddess archetype. And when he
Right.
gives back the head that he finds of Saint Winifred, which
Right. But
You know.
we'll get there in a minute.
okay,
Okay, so my overall critique proceeds thusly, and it's similar to, I want to say it was Jonathan Pajot, but I don't remember. It might have been someone else.
he basically was like, yeah, no,
But I hate it. So one of my overall critiques of movies that touch on the ancient world or the medieval world is they're always under the impression that Rome is partially in ruins or that Athens is partially in ruins. And as much as I hate the movie 300, I will give credit to them for this. That movie does not take place in a Sparta that is falling to ruin like a lot of other movies do.
yeah.
Right? It takes place in a Sparta that, while is not true to what Sparta probably looked like, is actually a place where people live.
Have you
right?
told people your favorite movie, Troy?
We've talked about this before. I hate that movie so much. Which is one of my friend.
We'll probably end up doing I think we should end up doing something on that.
You insist on tormenting.
If you guys enjoy this type of content where it's us, you know, either watching a movie and then comparing it to the book, you know, that's kind of the direction we're going with things, as well as the Lives of the Saints. Let us know if you want us to do Troy or anything else. Bring up some things that will make him do this. If you can see what he's doing.
If this happens, I will need to find a very large vessel of some kind and fill it with some sort of horrible booze that makes me want to die every time I take a drink of it, just so I can have some physical suffering to match my emotional suffering.
But Brad Pitt.
Brad Pitt was a good Achilles, but Achilles is not the hero of the Iliad.
Exactly. Okay, sorry. I know. Getting off topic.
But I hate this notion of the ancient world or the medieval world being dark, kind of ruined, very nasty places, right?
Yeah.
As we touched on when we started the first excerpt I read from Sir Gawain, right? It is a beautiful place with the nicest things that anyone can have, right? It's beautiful. It's
Yeah,
full of light.
the splendor of castle
Yeah.
life, gorgeous festivities, feasts, hunts, and obviously warfare, but the way it's portrayed is beautiful.
Right. It's not portrayed as drab, right? And in many ways, I've actually got to give credit to the guy that made the film, Sir Gawain, because he did put in film the most philosophically accurate aesthetic that portrays the Dark Ages, quote unquote, which is not a thing. If anyone uses that phrase, they're wrong, and they don't know anything about history.
What is that book that I got because you told me to get it? Barbarians to
Barbarians
Angels?
to Angels.
Yeah,
by
and that's a book that
Dr. Peter Wells.
Yeah,
Fantastic book.
Exactly, but it touches on stuff like that. You know that.
Also, Those Terrible Middle Ages by Regine Pernod. I think I'm saying her
Yeah.
name correctly. Her book is phenomenal.
But there's this notion that the Dark Ages were just horrible.
Well, that the Dark Ages were a thing. They're not a thing.
Exactly. Yeah.
But the whole notion that the medieval world is just dark and dreary, and that whenever you're in a castle, it's so dark that you can't hardly see your hand in front of your face, and that there's a couple of greasy looking torches putting out a little bit of light, and that everyone's pale and sickly looking. And like, one of the most irritating things is King Arthur sitting there messing with his tooth, and he's like, "Oh, my tooth hurts," and I'm like, "What the heck is this garbage?"
Yeah.
You know.
Go see a dentist, dude.
Well, it's not even that. It's just like going out of the filmmaker went out of his way to make the medieval period look.
That was a really bad joke.
Awful.
I'm not sure if they had dentists back then.
I mean,
Healers. They probably had healers or
we
something.
won't talk about this
Yeah.
right now. But yeah,
Their dentist would just pull it out.
like most of ours do.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think a root canal is? But Yeah, this notion that the world is just dreary and nasty is so screwed up, and I hate it so much. But that's my biggest critique. That's my biggest overall thematic critique: is the world is dark and loathsome.
Yeah,
and I hated that.
Exactly. And I think that was maybe like from an artistic perspective, that was the color grading that they chose to use, which gave it that look in the film. Because as I mentioned before, we see that most times in general, these themes in these movies are filmed in summer or spring, but the book is midwinter in northern England, and it's not necessarily ugly. It's, there's like there's a spirit to it.
But it's not dark either. It's not supposed to be dark.
Exactly. And I'm not sure if maybe that was just the color grading in the movie or if that was completely intentional, but even like the Christian scenes in the movie that were supposed to be Christian, like when they show the pentacle or the pentagram, it was very dark. There wasn't like a light to it. It didn't show like, oh, this represents something virtuous. It was like, this is another bad thing. Just like the icon of the Mother of God when it gets smashed, or that's the only time they show it. And it's a way of them kind of saying, what?
They show it one more time prior to that, but it's a brief flash.
Yeah. I don't even remember that.
It's cool, but continue with your synopsis of the movie. I'm sorry.
No, yeah, I think we should touch on Winifred and that scene, because if anybody has listened to one of our previous episodes, we talked about Saint Winifred, who is a 7th century Welsh martyr.
Right. Well, she's martyr / saint. She's one of those saints who was martyred, and then God brought her back to life.
Yeah. So
and she became a very famous nun.
She was martyred. She was martyred due to the fact that she wanted to remain chaste, and the person, the knight, was either a prince that was trying to court her, wasn't having it, cut off her head. Where her head fell, a miraculous spring formed, and it is still there to this day.
With red-tinged water.
Yes, you can visit it. And in the movie, what they do is he's traveling to the Green Chapel. He stumbles upon a house. I believe he lays down in the bed, and a woman comes in saying, who are you? Why are you here? And he's like, who are you? And she's fully human at this time. She's not a skeleton or anything. And she asks for his help to go retrieve her head from a pond that is outside. And
it's a swamp, not even a pond.
Yeah,
it's
a swamp. And the one thing that's stuck out to me about this scene is that I think he even asks, what do I get in return? He's not virtuous at all. If I do this, what do I get?
Pro quo.
Exactly. What do I get out of this? And that is not at all,
She also tells her story too.
Yeah.
And it's not a good version of the story.
Exactly.
She says, "Oh yeah, my name is Winifred. So and so showed up and wanted to marry me, and I turned him down, and he cut my head off and threw it in the pond, and I've not been able to get it out of the pond ever since. So I need your help to get it out of the pond." And it's like, first off, that's just not that hagiography, which is a big problem. That kind of stuff really rubs me the wrong way, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah, I'm wondering, the person who made this movie, I'm wondering what translation they read. Or maybe they read one and they're like, you know what, let's take this out.
Yeah, that's what I think happened. This is a good example of cultural.
It's a bastardization of, exactly, and that's...
which we'll talk about after a little bit.
Yeah. So with him meeting Winifred, and they don't even say Saint Winifred. They don't even give her the notoriety that
she deserves,
that God has bestowed on her as being a martyr and a saint.
Right.
It's just, my head is in this pond. I need you to get it. And he says, well, what do I get? So then he proceeds to dive down. There's a very dark, dramatic scene where he ends up finding her head, bringing it back into the home. And I believe she is no longer there.
Well, he finds a skeleton.
Yeah. In the bed that he had laid in, and he puts the head back,
right,
which is very symbolic as well, too.
Well, it's
not in a good way.
It plays into some later things that occur, but one of the other problems that occurs as well, and this is fairly early on in the film, is you see that Morgan Le Fay / Morgause, like they're both kind of the same character, which is sketchy.
Yeah.
They
She's also in the movie. She's not only Sir Gawain's mother,
Right.
but she's also the Green Knight's like wife's apprentice, or
Not even apprentice. She's like she's one of her ladies in waiting, but she also kind of seems to be this very
blind, wretched old woman.
this pagan character, which
Yeah.
she is in the film.
Yeah.
The Green Knight is not someone who has been told by Morgan, okay, well, go and do this thing to try to get Guinevere to die. It's
a ritual.
he's a golem.
Yeah.
I mean, he's a thing that was kind of put together and summoned to life, which is sketchy. And there's also, touching back on an earlier thing, Arthur and Guinevere in this film are shown to be this really old, kind of pathetic, childless couple, which they are childless.
Yeah.
In every legend, they're childless. However, they're not old and pathetic, like that first couple of lines that we read at the beginning of the podcast, right? They're both young. Arthur is in the peak of his strength, and Guinevere is the most beautiful woman anyone's ever seen. Right?
Yeah.
And they're full of life and joy. But all of the life and joy is not in this film. And Arthur's this sickly old man who kind of seems to want Gawain, who actually is not a knight in this movie.
Yeah, he can't, but he becomes knighted.
Kind of.
And
It's weird.
Yeah, he can't even knight him because he's so weak.
Right. Yeah, Arthur is this...
And I know you loved, what Sir Gawain ended up becoming.
Yeah, no. But Arthur is this impotent old man, and Guinevere is this kind of pathetic, whiny old woman. It's very, very strange.
Yeah.
And all of the knights are kind of, shall we say, gelded.
Yeah.
None of them, they're all ready to, when the Green Knight shows up, they're all ready to
Leave.
fight, but they also none of them seem to actually be willing to do so. They're all kind of hiding in the shadows with their hands on their swords. Like they're going to strike from the shadows.
They act as if they want to fight because of their notoriety as knights.
Well, I wouldn't even say that. They almost look like they want to fight to get out.
Yeah.
Like the idea that they're going to strike from the shadows in a very unchivalrous fashion seems to be what's being shown there. But that occurs when Gawain is being outfitted. He has this tiny pentagram on the boss of his shield, and then he has, and nothing is made of it. It's just kind of like, oh well, that's there, and like Ian said, it's in concert with this very pagan-looking priestess ritual.
Yeah.
Is when you see it, and then
There's no
also-
separation within
Right.
the two,
right.
showing one's good or bad. It's almost like they're the same.
They're the same thing. And then there's on the back of the shield, there's an icon of the Mother of God. And interestingly, with only one exception, the shield is always shown face up on the ground, which is symbolically problematic for a number of reasons. But what happens when Gawain leaves? Like he leaves Camelot. He's kind of forced to do it, which is also irksome. He's forced to do it. And
Yeah, it's like I said, he becomes the prey.
right,
He's not taking this. It's not a task. I know we said this word a lot, of virtue. He's like, oh, I guess I better get this over with. I better go do this, and it's not like a mission that he seems to care too much about.
right, and he gets like we said as well. He's not a knight, which is a problem because he is a knight. He's supposed to be a knight. And when he is accosted by this thief or this beggar who eventually robs him with a couple of other fellows, like he seems to actually be the leader of a gang of bandits. When he's robbed, the bandit's like, "Oh, are you a knight?" And he goes, "No, I'm not a knight." And he behaves in a very cowardly fashion. He insists that he's not a knight. And I don't even really understand what happened after that. Like the bits-
During the encounter,
yeah,
where I think he's asking for directions, that part, and the beggar gives him directions. He chooses to just ride away, like, "Thank you," and the beggar says, "Is my advice worth nothing?" And he says it over and over and over. I'm not sure if he gives him anything. I think he might give him a coin, but eventually that's when, as he continues traveling, he is in the woods and he's ambushed by other beggars and other pagans. They end up taking the axe. I think they take the axe, I believe.
Right.
His horse. stomp on the Mother of God, and then there's this long pan. It's like a 360-degree pan, which is brilliant as far as cinematics go, but it shows like this time period of winter turning into spring, which is another thing that we see in the film. It's very symbolic, like this solstice, this change, and that's where the Green Knight, and that's where we see that they try to portray him as like this deity, this nature god,
Right.
So there's all this weird stuff happening. It's something you definitely have to, I mean, Nathan would probably say don't watch it, but if you want to see the differences, it's worth watching multiple times to see all the different symbolism and the bastardization of the Christian faith,
Right.
of everything that's very blasphemous. But yeah, there's also, we spoke on this earlier, that during his travels he encounters numerous beasts, and he doesn't back down. He doesn't back down from them. And in the movie, there's a scene where there's like naked Nephilim or giants, whatever they're trying to portray. And I know sometimes giants can be symbolic of, weather, changes in weather, et cetera, but he flinches. There's one point where the giant reaches for him and he gets scared and he flinches. He's not even,
He doesn't fight ever.
Yeah, at all. I don't think
fights.
there's not a single fight in there, is there?
No, and that's
He gets beat up by beggars.
yes.
His icon gets stomped on. The giant comes after him, a naked giant with breasts, and he flinches. He doesn't want to hold up his end of the deal with the Green Knight. He flinches. He has a vision of running away.
And that's maybe what we ought to talk about, because
At first, I didn't know if it was a vision or if I was like, okay, so he...
we can talk about Sir
Yeah.
Bergelac's castle for a moment, because like Gawain shows up and is given a place to rest, and then the lady of the castle, I don't even know how to describe it. Like, she doesn't even quite seduce him. She just kind of shows up and abuses him
Yeah.
and then leaves. And that's the other thing as well. The green girdle that's given to him is given to him by Morgan, not the queen's wife, or not the king's wife.
No,
Sir
yeah.
Bergelac's
In
wife.
the movie, it's given to him by his mother.
Right.
Not exactly. You don't even see the girdle being given to him in the proper manner from
Right.
the Lord's wife.
It's just bizarre. So that happens. Gawain leaves, and then Sir Bergelac sees him and says, "Okay, well, next time you try to come back this way, I'm not going to be here. Sayonara." Mm-hmm. Which is, I don't even understand what they were trying to do with that.
I mean, I understand sometimes in Hollywood, certain movies, like, I know you're not a huge fan of the Lord of the Rings trilogy,
I like the movies. I'm not.
but what I'm saying is sometimes they, as long as those movies are, they had to leave out a lot of things,
Oh, yeah.
but they at least tried to keep within the story. In this one, it's not like they didn't have time. They just completely changed things.
right. They just bastardized the entire thing. So he eventually shows up to see the Green Knight, and he has this weird interaction with the fox, with Reynard, who says to him something to the effect of, "If you go to this chapel, you're going to die." So he kind of takes the place of the squire that's showing him where to go.
Exactly, but they use it in this weird pagan form of like a spirit guide, like
Right.
the fox is his spirit animal or something weird.
Right. And so he shows up, and the Green Knight is, as Ian was saying, very much an incarnation of the Green Man.
Yeah.
Like, that's what he is. He's just sitting there in the chapel. He wakes up and doesn't know when it is. He goes, "Oh, is it Christmas?" And it's like, why else would Gawain be there? Of
Yeah.
course it's Christmas.
Yeah, and you see in the film that there's
Or
like
New
a
Year's, actually, not Christmas. But
yeah, there's a certain scene where the Green Knight is walking down when it's time for the blows to not be exchanged, but when it's time for
him to return.
the blow, and you see there's no snow around.
Right.
The spring is flowing, and it's like
it's
this.
not wintertime.
Yeah, they're definitely trying to push some sort of like
Weird neo-pagan garbage.
yeah, like oh, it's springtime, and like I don't know
Springtime in the heart of the woods where no people are, where the old gods live.
exactly.
But the problem then occurs that the Green Knight goes to return the blow and behead Sir Gawain, and Gawain behaves in a craven manner. There is no, he flinches his shoulders a little bit because, he can't pick his head up and put it back on.
He runs
like,
away.
freaks out. And the Green Knight kind of is put off by it, but he doesn't really say anything. There's none of the mockery that occurs in the text. And then Sir Gawain has this vision where he gets up and runs away. And this is after the second blow is about to be
Yeah.
struck, or it has been attempted. He gets up and runs away, and I don't know what to do with that vision, other than to say it solidifies that the Sir Gawain portrayed in the film is a bloody coward.
But also the vision becomes true in a sense at the end, because he ends up becoming the king.
Right, because Arthur knights him, and he's so weak and feeble that he can barely do it.
Yeah.
Gawain becomes king for some reason.
So in the film, he gets knighted.
Right.
In the book, the
He's
poem,
already a knight.
he's already a knight.
Right.
And that's where they get this whole thing wrong. It's like,
One of the many places
yeah,
they get the whole thing.
but it's like they're trying to portray him in this way to where eventually he leads up to him being virtuous.
But he's not virtuous even as the king.
Yeah.
He is never in battle.
Because,
His own son, the son that's supposed to follow him, is the spawn of a prostitute.
yeah, who he leaves
So that
in
he
the
can marry Saint Winifred.
yeah in the beginning of
So she can seduce him,
yeah
rather.
in
which
the
is-
beginning he seems to love this prostitute, wants to spend her time with her, avoid mass
Right.
with her, and then at the end she gives birth and he throws some coin on her
Yeah,
bed.
he buys his son from
Yeah.
her, effectively. And then Saint Winifred shows up, and this is the most blasphemous portion. He marries her, and they have a daughter together, which is not okay. But also, his son dies.
It's like
It defeats the story of Saint Winifred.
Completely.
Saint Winifred's story is about chastity in
Yeah.
many ways. That's not the only thing it's about, but that's one
it
of
is
the
like
big
the most
takeaways.
virtuous Christian.
Right. She would rather die than not be a nun.
Yeah,
Um,
but in this story,
she performs God forgive me for saying this. She performs a post-mortem seduction of a random virtueless wretch of a man.
yeah,
And then because of what he does, she is restored to life.
Which
Not because of God's mercy. She's restored to life, and she comes and seduces him.
that's the part that I couldn't understand, is that in the film she's dead, but then she becomes reincarnated.
Well, no, she's not reincarnated. She's resurrected.
She's resurrected to marry him.
Right, which is a complete and utter inversion of the story. And it's not... I'm not going to be as charitable as Ian. That filmmaker knew exactly what he was doing. You don't get to butcher a story about a saint that badly
Yeah.
and not be ignorant of what's going on.
Yeah, because he knew Saint Winifred. I don't even think they refer to her as saint
No.
at all.
No, I mean...
So yeah, in the end, we see him becoming king with, I don't even want to say it, with Winifred on his left. I'm not going to, yeah. With Winifred on his left, he has a bastard son.
Who dies in a battle of some kind.
Yes, who dies in a battle. He has a daughter with Winifred. And at the very end, should we...
Yeah, at the very end, the castle is besieged by somebody. Nothing is specified. And Gawain takes the green girdle off, which he's left on the entire time, and his head falls off, indicating that what happens after this vision is over was one of the kind of outcomes. It's hard to say.
Yeah.
But what that seems to indicate is that the Green Knight cut his head off, but because he's invulnerable with that girdle on, he's all right. So when he takes it off, the wound takes effect.
Yeah, he pulls it out of his... He looks down and he's pulling it out of his side.
Right, and then his head falls
As soon
off.
as he pulls it out all the way, his head falls off. I think the crown kind of
Right.
rolls away. And then we see at the very, very end, past the credits, that their daughter picks up the crown, puts it on, and this is just the spirit of the age when we're seeing, like this masculine hero archetype, this legendary knight, these mythical stories,
They're just being spat upon.
they're being spat upon, and we're turning them into women are going to be what is it?
It's a kind of feminist nihilism.
Yeah.
Because one of the comments
The
that's made,
the future is feminine,
Right.
is like what they were
Yeah.
trying to say. That's the saying. It's like the future is feminine. It's like,
because that's one of the things that the green or that Gawain says to the Green Knight, and it's one of the only times the Green Knight speaks.
Yeah,
But
at the
he
end, on the
says-
final blow.
He says, "Is this really all there is?" Gawain says that, and the Green Knight kind of looks at him and he goes, "What does he say?" He says,
Ought there be more?
"Yeah." He says, "What else ought there be?"
Yeah.
Or ought there be more? Something
And
to
that-
that
and that's
effect.
it.
And then he kills Gawain,
Yeah.
and it's. Like,
But
I
he
can't
does.
think
But
of
they don't show him killing him.
No, but he obviously dies. The
Yeah.
post-credit scene indicates that that's what happens. But it's such a nihilistic film in opposition to what the story of Gawain actually is about. And I'm not going to say that this is all Gawain's about, Sir Gawain's about, because there is far more to it than addressing one's shame and doing penance for one's sin, right?
Yeah.
But that's a big part of this story, is being a virtuous man, and when you stumble and fall,
You repent and you
you
confess.
repent and you pick up and you keep on going, right? That's a big part of this story.
You don't do what we see in the movie,
Right. And so
which we had to look at each other at that scene,
I was,
and I was like, "Is that what I think it is?" And it was.
yeah, it's just bad. But this brings us to the notion of cultural appropriation. We've got a couple more minutes, right?
Oh yeah, we're good.
Okay. So there's a fellow by the name of Dr. Gwillem Morris Baird. Or Baird Morris Baird. I think it's. Let me look it up. Look his name up real fast. I want to make sure I get this right. Yeah, Gwillem Morris Baird. He's a Welsh scholar that studies Celtic mythology.
And if you guys are interested, this is. Let's see if I can get that to focus.
Tolkien's
should.
translation of
There we
Gawain and
go.
the Green Knight. That also has Pearl in it. It has a couple of lectures on other topics as well. And I believe that has Sir Orfeo.
And then this is another one. This is Medieval Romances from Modern Library.
By Roger and Laura Loomis. And they are both fantastic scholars. I cannot recommend them enough. I've read a lot of their work and they're really good.
I don't know what has happened to
The autofocus.
my autofocus on my camera. Yeah, I'm gonna figure some things out. But yeah,
Right.
I can put the links to the books in the description, or if I forget to, you can send us a message. And
If you find a place where the medieval romance is still in print, that would be awesome, because I found this at a random bookstore that was going out of sale.
oh, you got this
business.
at Starlight?
Yes, for $250. I was very pleased to find it. I made a lot of good purchases there.
Yeah, it's got the story of Percival,
Right.
which we'll do.
Percival's a good story.
Yeah,
But
which maybe we'll do with Richard Rowland if that ends up happening. I'm sure that'll be a good topic of conversation.
he's already done that with Jonathan Peugeot.
Yeah.
But either way, this fellow, Dr. Gwillem Morris Baird, in the first episode of his podcast, which is called Celtic Source, which I highly recommend. It's fantastic. He's a really good scholar. He talks about the idea of cultural appropriation. And I'll not lie, when I first heard that that's what he was going to talk about in that podcast, I was really put off.
Yeah, because usually we hear cultural appropriation in the sense of like, and I'm not saying I'm not going to necessarily voice my opinion on it, but it's like blackface or wearing
Or dreadlocks.
exactly like
ridiculous, petty things.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know if blackface is petty.
Well, no, a lot of it is petty though.
Yeah.
The whole notion of dreadlocks, or of can
Like you have to be Jamaican to have dreadlocks.
a lady from Seattle sell tacos? Like that kind of stuff is
Yeah.
dumb.
So that's usually how we hear cultural appropriation
Right.
talked about, especially, people like the leftist agenda is very, politically correct. And, this is cultural appropriation. Taco Tuesday. Like, how dare you have a Taco Tuesday,
Right.
But the way that he speaks of cultural appropriation is has a little bit of a deeper meaning.
Because I'd heard a couple of his lectures before, I was like, okay, I'll roll the dice. I'll give this guy a chance, and I want to see what he's got to say. I might hate this. I really hope I don't, because I like the little bit of his work that I've heard. Whatever. So I listened to it, and he gives the example of people who retell specifically Celtic mythology badly. His example is that that an Englishman tells, say, a Welsh myth, or makes up a Welsh myth and just butchers it, right? And
Sounds familiar.
well, and his observation is, look, you've got to realize that to the Welsh, British or English, shall we say, oppression is a very real thing. And it was until fairly recently. And he goes, so when a Brit shows up and, say, buggers up the story of King Arthur, it's like, seriously, this is happening again? But his definition that he gives, not to get too lost in the weeds, is cultural appropriation is the intentional or ignorant misappropriation or misuse of culture. So what he would say is not that he would not say that cultural appropriation is a Englishman retelling King Arthur like Thomas Mallory.
But it's retelling it badly.
Retelling it incorrectly.
Yeah.
Generally because of a lack of knowledge or a lack of care for the source material. Right? So, for example, an example of cultural appropriation in the United States would be someone retelling the story of Quanah Parker, who is the last great war chief of the Comanches, the Panatica tribe of the Comanches, right? Cultural appropriation would be
doing a disservice to the legend of someone.
Would be someone retelling Quanah's story and lying about him, right? Not to say that lie is necessarily bad. That lie could be something like, oh, he was really virtuous and was didn't oppress black men or something like that, or was anti-slavery. That would be cultural appropriation because that's not true. And that's known to be not true.
Yeah.
Something like that would be cultural appropriation. And so I think that this story of this modern film adaptation of Gawain and the Green Knight is the definition of cultural appropriation. The story is well known. There are multiple variations of it, but the director did a really, really bad job.
Well, the first thing that we see is Sir Gawain is Indian.
Well, I don't even care about that. One of the examples that's been brought up with regard to
and I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm just saying
right, he's East Indian.
They had to be woke.
Right.
They had to be woke. Like, we need to make them ethnically diverse. First and foremost, we can't have a white male who plays, the hero, even though that is,
even though they chose an Indo-European male, which is more or less the same thing.
Yeah.
But it's like, I don't even care so much about that. You can cast whoever you want as long as they're a good fit.
As long as the story holds true to the truth of the story.
Right. Well, so the example that's been put out lately, and to be fair, I haven't watched this, but they did Hollywood put out a recent film adaptation of Macbeth, where Training Day, what's his name? Denzel Washington.
Yeah.
Denzel Washington is cast as Macbeth. And apparently there were some people who were like, oh, well, Macbeth is a medieval Scotsman. There's no way that he's black. And I'm like, I don't really care, because I suspect that the justification for casting Denzel Washington as Macbeth was not, oh, we need a black guy.
No, it's based on the fact that he's an amazing actor.
Yeah, he's a freaking phenomenal actor. I would have been just as happy with Idris Elba.
Yeah.
Like, Idris Elba's a really,
Exactly.
really good actor.
Exactly.
Say whatever else you want about him. He's a really, really good actor. So I don't care. If you pick an actor to portray a character in a film based on their talent, go for it. I don't care.
But to do it out of wokeness, like to make Superwoman or Superman bisexual.
I mean, the fact that sex is even playing into Superman is absurd. But to
Exactly.
be fair, I don't know a lot about comic book universes.
Yeah, but
so I don't know
that's what they're
about
starting to do, is to turn all these superheroes into bisexual. Or Disney, apparently there's like a new Buzz Lightyear movie coming out where there's like the first same-sex kiss between.
They do realize they're cartoons, right?
But still, they're doing this whole woke thing. Like, Buzz Lightyear has no gender. They're taking away the hero archetype again.
Well, it's not that they're taking it away; they're destroying it.
Yeah,
that's part of the problem, because, like, so like we've already said, the gravest cultural appropriation, and I still really hate using that term because I don't like the connotations, even though I think that Gwillim's
well, there's a way to
definition
take
is good.
Exactly, there's a way to take things back. Like, when you hear cultural appropriation, if you know more specifically what it refers to versus just like we said, like Taco Tuesday or white woman having dreadlocks. It's like, that's not cultural appropriation. Right. We appropriate cultures all the time, but whether or not we do it, rightly.
If anyone would like to find a culture in isolate that has no other, shall we say, inputs that have defined it, I defy them. That doesn't exist.
Well, what about Protestantism, for example,
Well, I mean, yeah.
as far as cultural appropriation?
Well, I hesitate to use that because I dislike because. So
Not to bash on our Protestant
anyone,
brothers and sisters, but more so like
anyone who's familiar with church history will be aware that the dogmas and practices of Protestantism are really novel for the most part. There are some aspects of them that are very old, but a lot of it's extremely novel. However, just because, say, the Martin Luthers, John Calvins, and Ulrich Zwingli's of the world were what we would classify as schismatics, or if you're going to be really ballsy, heretics, which I'm not going to do, just because they were innovationists doesn't mean that the people who are 300 or 400 or 500 years downstream from what they have done are intentionally partaking of that, knowing that they are,
heretics or schismatics.
Well, they've inherited it. They don't know.
Exactly.
I mean,
They
you and I were that way.
Well,
right?
no, exactly.
We had no idea.
I had no idea that there was such a rich church history, or there was such thing as a liturgy, or even a Catholic mass.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And so there is that notion. You could say that those movements are engaging in cultural appropriation, but it's not intentional, it's not conscious, and it's not in bad faith. Right? That's the tradition that they've received. So you really can't fault them for that.
No.
But to give an example of a modern King Arthur adaptation.
Real quickly. Cheers, brother.
Cheers.
It is
Being a cheap wine, that's pretty good.
It is Sunday, so we're
Yes, on the days of the week that end with Y, other than Sunday and Saturday, I drink kvass.
and I've decided to give up beer for Lent, which has been giving up meat and cheese. Okay.
I would rather have cheese than beer.
Yeah.
110%.
Sorry, yeah.
But to give an example of a King Arthur movie that is not necessarily engaging in cultural appropriation, but is just giving primacy to some things that are maybe a bit absurd, right? Is the King Arthur movie that was done with Clive Owen and Keira Knightley and hell's bells, who are the other actors?
Definitely A-list actors.
Yeah, like terrible movie.
Yeah.
Terrible movie.
I mean, cinematically filmed great,
but
in general.
Mads Mikkelsen. That's the one I was looking for. He is a fantastic actor. Very underrated. I love Mads Mikkelsen. But that movie is just adding an overemphasis on freedom to the King Arthur myth, which, if we're going to be honest, is kind of there to an extent. Not as...
Not in the sense that they're trying to portray.
Not as aggressively as they do in that film, and definitely not in the 1776 mode of freedom, which is what they kind of insinuate. And they get some things culturally wrong with Rome and with the way that Britain would have functioned at the time and the way the Anglo-Saxon invasions would have functioned. But nevertheless, it's not engaging in intentional, what's the word? Mutilation of the King Arthur myth. It's just privileging one thing more than ought to be done. Right? So, I mean, to an extent, I guess you might say that there's some cultural appropriation. But you contrast that with a movie, or with a comic book of King Arthur I believe it's called King Arthur 3000 or something like that.
I haven't seen that.
Neither have I. I heard about it, and once I heard about it, I knew I would never read it.
Well, it's something maybe we could look at.
What happens there is, because as everyone knows in King Arthur, right, Lancelot and Guinevere are fairly notorious adulterers in that series, and that's one of the reasons why Guinevere seems to be barren, because King Arthur can produce children. That does happen. His bastard son Mordred is who kills him, right? But Guinevere is childless. However, in this King Arthur 3000, apparently the premise is something along the lines of there's a cause, or like a galactic level threat that somehow leads to King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table being resurrected in the year 3000. Right? So really weird already, strange premise from the get-go. But the way it ends, from what I've been told, is King Arthur sacrifices himself, and in either right before he does so or as it's happening, he blesses Arthur and Guinevere to marry after finding out that Guinevere is pregnant with Lancelot's child. that is cultural appropriation. Because the way that that is supposed to end, the way that every other myth ends it, is Lancelot becomes a hermit and goes and lives a life of repentance, and Guinevere becomes an abbess and lives a life of repentance and only sees Lancelot one more time as she's dying. Or no, she doesn't. She dies, and Lancelot goes to her burial, and then he dies. So King Arthur 3000 is cultural appropriation. It is intentionally abusing the Arthurian mythos to make it modern. As is
the movie we watched last night. You know, they're intentionally bastardizing symbolism, saints,
that's still
a knight, everything about it, you know. And like I said many times, you can like the way it's filmed, but if you can look at the deeper meaning in it, it's blasphemous. The film itself is complete blasphemy, and yeah, it's the spirit of the age where we're seeing them trying to invert everything good, and that's why, you know, Jonathan Pajot and like we've talked about people like, you know, Doc and Storm, and hopefully we can be on the same page as, like, you know, re-enchanting, or bringing a sense of enchantment back into the world through storytelling. And I encourage you, if you are a Christian, if you're an Orthodox Christian, to not, you know, I mean, this is, you know, Lord willing, not to lay down your pen or to not pick up your camera. I encourage you to do these things to glorify God and to bring a sense of, you know, of righteousness and sanctity back into the world, because when we see that a movie like this sells out and becomes a box office hit, it's really disappointing, because this is, some people have never heard of King Arthur before this movie, and then this is what they think King Arthur and the Green Knight and Sir Gawain are about, and they've never heard of Winifred until this, and then they think Winifred is, you know, not Winifred. So yeah, I mean,
I agree with you.
It's our duty as Christians and as followers of Christ to bring a sense of sanctity back into the world, and it's, you know, it's slowly happening. There's, like, I'm not sure if you could call it like a great revival, but I'm seeing a lot of people really striving and pushing to bring this back into, you know, into the spirit of the age, and kind of fighting against it. And it's, you know, it's a spiritual warfare that is ongoing. It's not going to stop, and you know, it's been going for many years, but it's something that, you know, we're called to do, obviously with the guidance of your spiritual father, or sometimes God, you know, has us lay down our talents to pick up other things. You know, I've struggled greatly with not doing photography as much as I want to, or, you know, partaking in the things that I want to, but I'm realizing there's a deeper reason behind it, and it's hard at first, but I think, you know, we're called to do this. We're called to be the men and women that Christ has allowed us to be, you know, and it's up to us.
If what you're doing can't be placed on the altar as a sacrifice to God, don't do it.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
But at the same time, if you can offer something to God, you need to try.
And pray on it.
Right. You know, a lot of people criticize movies or works of art because they are they follow too many archetypes, right? It's like, oh, well, you know, that had to have the hero's journey and it played out this way, and that's just kind of obnoxious. And it's like, well, it may not be original, but also consider this. Archetypes exist for a reason.
Yeah.
You know, there's a reason why, as much as a lot of people dislike Joseph Campbell, there's a reason why he made the connection that Luke Skywalker is Christ, right? God forgive me for saying that. I dislike that phrase very much, but he's not wrong in the archetype.
Yeah.
We tell those kinds of
in
stories.
An archetypal way.
Right. We tell those kinds of stories exist.
He's a savior.
Right. Those kinds of stories exist.
And it's a mythological. It's not like Luke Skywalker is Christ. It's not. He's not God incarnate.
No,
it's a story.
Exactly.
And we're all called to be Christ in the midst. Right. You know, we all have that potential within us.
There's nothing wrong with retelling old stories in new ways as long as you recognize that the archetypes that are there are good archetypes that belong there.
Yeah.
Right? Like there's a reason that the King Arthur story's been around for 1600 years, give or take some change, right? It's been modified a little bit. New details have been added. New characters have been added. You know, Lancelot's actually a fairly late character. He doesn't exist in a lot of the older stories.
But there's also a reason that has been modernized.
Right.
You know, there's a reason they're taking these things from us.
And they're trying to desecrate them.
It's like, it's kind of convenient, but also not at all, that they decided last year or the year before to make a Green Knight movie. You know?
Yeah.
When the world is falling to pieces, so
Make
to
a movie
speak.
where the world is inverted.
Exactly. So,
Right. Tell a better story. I believe it was Madeleine L'Engle that said something along the lines of "show the world a light so lovely" or something to that effect. I forget what the proper quote is.
Yeah.
But that's what we have to do. Our stories are better. We have to tell them.
yeah, so if anybody that's listening to this, if you're a writer, if you're an artist, and you know, I'm not opposed to you not being orthodox. If you have a story that re-enchants the world, that is full of beauty from a Christian perspective, send us a message. We'd love to have you on. We'd love to possibly feature you in one of the magazines. There's some stuff we're talking about in the future as far as publication, Lord willing. I think that it is very important for us to... It would be great to see this movie done the right way. Eventually, it would be right.
A real Green Knight movie would be awesome.
Exactly. So, you know, Lord willing, these type of things can happen. And, you know, that's why we're doing these type of videos, to kind of show the contrast between the spirit of the age and then the spirit of God. And it's, like I said, it's a war. It's an all-out war, and Hollywood and the elites are doing everything they can to completely destroy what is beautiful, and to put it like the movie was dark. It was depressing. I didn't come out of watching. I mean, I've watched it multiple times just to try to pick up on it, but I don't feel good after I watch that movie at all. So yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else to say? We're nearing 2 hours. I think that's kind of a good time to end it.
I would like to observe that you thought we could do this in an hour.
I knew we couldn't. I thought 1 hour for listeners and then 1 hour for Patreon, but I think we'll start on that next week. We'll come up with a topic, and yeah, make sure to like, subscribe, and subscribe to the Patreon. It really helps us out, even if it's $5 a month. That pays for us to be able to sit down and have a cup of coffee and meet up and discuss ideas, and ultimately,
And also, leave us some comments. I know there was, on the last video we did about St. Patrick and St. David, there was some discussion about there's a comment or two that were left that were somewhat critical, and I'm not saying this in a negative way. And
no, we appreciate it.
To the people who left those comments, I appreciate them. But
shout out to Crispy. We're gonna reply to your comment privately, and maybe
I might make a video rebutting some of the points or talking about some of the points. But either way,
we're open to discourse, and we're open to learn things as well.
Yeah, lest the history of this podcast be forgotten. The idea was born in a bar that I was notorious in for being Socrates, for lack of a better phrase. We were just wandering around and people saying, "Oh, what do you think about this?" And I'm going, "Oh, what? You think that?
Yeah,
that's absurd."
People coming up to you telling that their boyfriend is possessed, and
that was not a
me
fun
almost getting
conversation.
kicked out because some guy wanted to
Well, we won't,
fight me.
we
Yeah,
won't
but
discuss
I'm just
that.
saying,
But
like,
yeah, the possession conversation was real, and that wasn't fun.
this
was scary.
podcast stemmed from us. You know, it's not like we got drunk at this bar, but from us having a few beers and me saying, "Hey, let's start a podcast." So we're completely open to all comments. You know, shout out to Crispy Johnson. I know you commented on the last video, and yeah,
I appreciate the comment. brother.
Exactly. And as well as the someone commented on that they would like to see a podcast not talking about the war. And just to touch on this briefly, we've decided to completely stay out of that topic as far as even having a podcast or an episode on it. And I will say this again: pray for both Ukraine and Russia. This is not me bringing it up. It's just our duty as Orthodox Christians and as Christians in general to pray for those who are suffering in the world. You know, when I pray at night, I say, you know, Lord, have mercy on all those who are suffering, Christian and non-Christian. it's just, I think it's our duty. So, we're not, whether Nathan has a certain view or I have a certain view, it doesn't matter. That's not what we're here to do. So yeah, if you have,
as everyone knows, I don't have views. I have the correct opinion.
yeah.
Very seldom do I get to put you on your back foot, so I have to take the opportunities when they arise.
Yeah, I agree. But there was a quote that I wanted to end the podcast with, if that's okay.
For sure.
It's a quote from C.S. Lewis, and it says, "I didn't go to religion to make me happy. I always knew a bottle of port would do that. If you want a religion to make you feel really comfortable, I certainly don't recommend Christianity." And I think that's very relevant to...
It's a very fitting Lenten quote.
Yeah, exactly. If you want something that makes you comfortable, Christianity is not that. There's a lot of struggle, but the homily we saw today was what kind of fits into that, where we're in this race, so to speak. It's not an easy race. The saints and the martyrs and Christ himself are cheering us on to get through these things, especially times like Lent. So just hold fast. Or what is it? What was the quote from that we read the other day? Hold fast and do the little things. I believe.
Yes. Do the little things.
Do the little things. So pray and repent and confess and go to liturgy and like and subscribe. I'm just kidding.
As a last word to any non-Christians who are listening, if in opposition to that quote, you are looking for something to make you happy and comfortable, when you sicken of that, when you're weary of pursuing that thing that you can never possess, turn to Christ. And if we're still kicking, send us a message and we'll pray for you.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to put it. I'm like happier than I've ever been, but it's like a longful sorrowing. I don't know.
Perhaps you're looking for the word harimolipi.
Yeah.
Joyful sorrow.
It's like, not that we're not happy. I mean, Nathan's ecstatic. No, but in all honesty, yeah, I wanted to end it with that quote. And I think maybe I've been having this idea of starting or ending with a quote. And I'm also looking for things to disturb Nathan. So if you have any did you know facts that will make Nathan cringe.
To be fair, you made me watch the Green Knight movie, so
that was ours for the week.
Pretty bad.
Exactly. So did you know that Nathan hates Hollywood movies about King Arthur? But yeah,
it was bad.
With that,
so bad.
With that being said, I hope you enjoy this episode, and yeah, send us a message. We're here for you. If you'd like us to pray for you, please don't hesitate to ask. And yeah.
God bless and have a blessed Lent.
May God be with you, and we will see you soon.
Cheers.